It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome you to this webinar today about the opportunities in the markets of Indonesia and Malaysia. Business Sweden in these two countries have made a thorough market research and are going to present us with their findings. Yeah, I'm not going to go much into that, but just hand over to the trade commissioners of Indonesia and Malaysia, Erik Odar and Emma Brons. So please, Erik and Emma, the screen is yours.
Great. Thanks, Anna. You start, right, Erik?
I believe it's Malaysia that starts.
Okay. Great. So thank you, Anna, for giving us the opportunity. My name is Emma Brons, and I'm the Trade Commissioner of Sweden to Malaysia. We're based in Kuala Lumpur, and Business Sweden has had an office here since 2005. And we're currently a team of 8 colleagues supporting Swedish businesses in their international growth, and in our case, particularly in Malaysia. One of my colleagues is here with me, Henrik Sigmund. Henrik is a consultant and has been working with Business Sweden in Berlin and Delhi before joining us in KL. And Henrik will soon share with you some of the insights on the Malaysian healthcare sector and the Medtech industry in particular. Within the healthcare sector, we've seen a lot of interest from Swedish companies in a few years back, and we've had a number of successful larger initiatives within digital health, partner searches, stakeholder and market analysis, and it's given us lots of valuable insights and contacts, and we know that there is a demand for the quality and the innovation that Sweden is so well known for. So if we move into the market insights on Malaysia, I think you can move back one slide, Henrik. Yeah. Our presentation covers an overview and trends, some insights on projects and investments within primarily hospitals, the landscape and the stakeholders, a go-to-market roadmap, and the problem statements and the corresponding opportunities that we've identified. So next slide. Malaysia, with its almost 33 million inhabitants, has a healthcare spending per capita that's the highest in the ASEAN region, excluding Singapore, and has a CAGR of 5%. The proportion of the population over 60 years is with 6 to 8%, fairly small compared to the European levels, of course, but it is growing. And this is increasing the pressure on the healthcare system in the country. And in terms of market size for medical devices, it's estimated to reach $2.6 billion by 2025. And what's interesting also to point out about Malaysia is that it's a destination for medical tourism, with 1.3 million medical tourists arriving in 2019. And these figures are now recovering after an obvious downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And now the slides disappeared, Henrik.
Sorry, I hope you can see the slides again.
Yes, we can. Thank you. And now I hand over to Henrik.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Emma. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're located. Very much looking forward to having a brief walkthrough of the Malaysian healthcare sector and medical device industry here in Malaysia, as well as share what kind of opportunities we see for Swedish companies based here then. But before I dive into the overall medical device market and opportunities we see there, I thought we could start off with a very brief introduction to the Malaysian healthcare system. So this healthcare system, which was inherited from the British after independence in 1957, it's a unified healthcare system which has more or less remained in place. There has been some reforms, of course, but the overall core tenet, which is that the Ministry of Health controls the public healthcare from the national to the state and district level, has remained in place throughout the time then. But some interesting changes we have seen, of course, is that during the 1980s, as part of several liberalization initiatives from the Malaysian government, private for-profit hospitals were permitted in Malaysia, which has led to the healthcare system we see today, where we have a very large number of private hospitals operating across the nation, then predominantly catering towards this rising middle class population, demanding access to high quality and fast care. But something I would like to point out when it comes to the overall healthcare system we have today in Malaysia is that, unknown to many, I would say, is that it is one of the strongest healthcare systems in emerging markets. It has frequently received awards for the quality of care that it provides, as well as at the price point it provides that care. The UN Development Program, for instance, has called Malaysia a model for other developing countries, and Malaysia's primary care model has been acknowledged by the World Health Organization as a viable system to achieve health for all. As in this Malaysian healthcare system, then Malaysians are able to receive heavily subsidized high-quality care that does not even cover the cost of providing those healthcare services in most cases. So, the Ministry of Health is in turn dependent on financing from the central government. So the fees that Malaysians do pay at these to receive health treatment is heavily subsidized. And I mentioned previously, this strong private healthcare sector. Now, this strong private healthcare sector does not only target the local wealthy middle-class Malaysians, but it also has turned Malaysia into a health tourism hub where foreigners from both developed and developing nations can come to Malaysia and get procedures done at high quality and receive this high quality care at a price point that is below other markets then. But if we look ahead in terms of what kind of future plans and initiatives we can see in the Malaysian healthcare sector, we see here on this slide, of course, that healthcare sector is increasing. It's going to increase from $18 billion in 2021 to $26 billion by 2026. Now, this increase in healthcare expenditure is largely driven by the need to provide a better healthcare services to the rising middle class, as well as deal with the increasing health costs from the aging population, increase in non-communicable diseases, and more, but also, of course, to provide better care to the B40 income group in Malaysia, which represents the bottom 40%. Similarly, if we look at the Ministry of Health programs in terms of financing and investments, we do see that upgraded equipment, devices, and better facilities is one of the key focus areas in the coming years, and this is set to drive expenditure from the public sector side. But if we look, in terms of the overall debates in Malaysia regards to healthcare, it's kind of interesting. We have seen some interesting tractions and movements in the past few weeks regarding the overall healthcare expenditure, where the Ministry of Health has now recently asked the central government to increase the healthcare spending to reach 5% of GDP, which is a double of the current 2.6% of GDP, which is spent on public healthcare then. On the private sector, we also have some interesting movements and initiatives ongoing there. We have, of course, following the COVID-19 pandemic, we have now a strong resumption in health tourism, where private hospitals are again able to receive patients from abroad, which is in turn allowing for more revenue and thus greater investments in new projects and equipment, which we have identified, and I will, in the coming slide, go through a bit more in terms of how we see the ongoing new hospital projects and what opportunities we see for Swedish companies then. So as I mentioned, we have a strong public and private healthcare sector in Malaysia, which operate hand in hand, I think, but there are some key differences between both parties. For one, private hospitals outnumber the public hospitals by having 58% of all hospitals in Malaysia are privately owned. But if we look at in terms of the number of hospital beds, we see that most hospital beds are located at the public hospitals, which have in total 44,000 hospital beds compared to the private sector's 17,000, thus illustrating the typical larger size of public hospitals. But there are also some key geographical differences between the two, as we see that public hospitals are typically located in the central and rural parts of Malaysia, while private hospitals are typically located in more urban areas. And this fact, of course, it stems to do a bit more with that Malaysian, the Ministry of Health has a role to play with delivering equal access to healthcare across the nation, whereas private hospitals can choose typically to be located where their key patients would be, which is in the more urban areas in Malaysia. And if we look, in terms of geography between West and East Malaysia, what kind of differences can we see there? We see, of course, that West Malaysia, being the most populated, the most wealthy part, as well as the most developed area of Malaysia, has the highest number of hospitals at close to 79%, while East Malaysia then has around 21% of all hospitals then. But interesting, we see in terms of our Swedish companies is, of course, the strong demand for new hospitals, both to improve rural care as well as improve the existing and access to healthcare in urban areas, but also to cater to the rising middle class and the health tourism that is increasing now again following COVID-19. And Malaysia, of course, is home to a very high number of hospital projects, I would say. For a country of 30 million, we have identified over 35 new ongoing hospital projects, which is not upgrading existing one, but 35 totally new hospitals that are being built across the nation, ranging from both public and private hospitals. And just to mention, a few, we have Ministry of Health, of course, a key provider of the healthcare services in Malaysia, is aiming to build 12 new hospitals in Malaysia as part of the 12th Malaysia Plan. We also have private actors taking an interest and increasing their investments in the market. We have one example here, of course, is Sunway Medical. For those of you who are not familiar with this company, it's basically a large conglomerate in Malaysia doing everything from real estate to palm oil to healthcare, and they are aiming to build 8 new private hospitals across the nation. There are, of course, numerous other private hospital groups such as KPJ, IHH, and Columbia Asia and more, which I could dive into, but I think just to summarize, there are a lot of these actors are taking more increased investments on the market as they do foresee a great opportunity and a great growth in the healthcare sector then. And in terms of the specific implications for Swedish companies, so what's in it, for the Swedish companies, of course, is that these new hospital projects are leading to significant opportunities for both medical devices and medical equipment manufacturers, as solutions that are used in these facilities are typically imported from abroad. So even though Malaysia has some manufacturing of medical devices, for now the majority of this is still imported from abroad, which is a point I will dive into in the coming slides then. So if we look at the Malaysian medical device market, I think it's one of the most interesting and fast-growing industries in Malaysia. But something I would like to point out is, a lot of companies they fail to consider is that although Malaysia is the 6th largest country in Southeast Asia by population, it holds the largest medical device market in Southeast Asia, offering numerous opportunities to fast movers looking to capture new markets and opportunities. Not only is Malaysia a key focus market for manufacturers looking to explore the business opportunities in terms of selling to both the public and private sector, but also from a manufacturing standpoint. So Malaysia is home to a very strong medical device production industry, which is particularly located in Penang, which is about 1 hour flight north of Kuala Lumpur. But if we look at the overall market outlook and growth for medical devices in Malaysia, we see that the industry is set to grow. The value of the industry is set to grow from $1.9 billion to $2.8 billion in 2026, with each of the specific areas seeing high growth rates then. For instance, we have consumables being the largest area here is set to grow by 11.5%. We also see other large areas, including diagnostic imaging and patient age. And this increase, in terms of all of these, why these increased, of course, is the wealthier middle class one demanding better access to healthcare. We have an aging population. We have increased investments from both public hospitals as well as private hospitals, which in turn will require new equipment, as well as the resumption of the economy and strong economic growth we see forthcoming. And although Malaysia, as mentioned, there is a quite strong local production, point I'll dive into in the coming slides, we do see that for now most medical devices are imported from markets such as Europe, US, and Japan, with close to almost 80% of the medical devices being available on the market today being imported from outside the nation. And if we look, in terms of what specific segments is being imported more or less, it's, the consumables, diagnostic imaging, and patient aids are the three largest categories when it comes to medical device imports in Malaysia. So if we look in terms of, the local presence or the local medical device manufacturing industry here in Malaysia, I think some interesting insights to share already, of course, is that, 60% of the world market for medical gloves is coming from Malaysia. So Malaysia is particularly strong when it comes to medical gloves, as well as, the catheters. So around 80% of the global catheters come from Malaysia. And across, if we look, across the board in terms of these consumables, diagnostic, patient aid, and so on, we do see that there are local as well as multinationals present within the country doing manufacturing or having some kind of manufacturing or assembly facility in the nation. Looking at the strongest medtech unit, consumables, we see a strong growth of 6.1% from 2021 to 2026, which will largely be driven by the increased demand for PPE. We see that although Malaysia is in the endemic phase now with COVID-19, we still see that face masks are still typically used, still required indoors and still used in day-to-day life. But of course, the healthcare sector is driving the high growth rate as well. And some noteworthy companies to mention here, of course, is Top Glove, one of the largest, if not largest, medical gloves producers located from Malaysia. But we're also, of course, happy to see two Swedish companies here. We have Bactiguard and Mölnlycke active here in Malaysia. If we look at, across the board in terms of other interesting segments to dive into, we see, very strong high growth rate in orthopedics and prosthetics, which is set to see, around 20% growth, which is largely driven by the aging population here in Malaysia as well as global demand. But, if we look in terms of the market size of this, it is still rather small compared to the other categories. And just as a final note on this slide, I think, it would be also key to mention patient aids. We see also a very strong growth rate here of close to 9%. And this is, again, it's the aging population, which is largely driving the market, but there are also some financial subsidies which are having an impact on the market as patients are able to, partially utilize or fully utilize subsidies to help purchase this kind of equipment. But when we look at in terms of the opportunities, they are available across the board, I would say, and it is, offering numerous opportunities to foreign medical device manufacturers, regardless if one is aiming to sell medical devices or set up production in the country. And if we look at, in terms of the go-to-market strategy, how can companies choose to enter this market? We have here in this step-by-step process, beginning first with, identifying the problem statements, what kind of challenges is affecting that specific medical device treatment area or disease in Malaysia, as well as setting, what are your goals here in Malaysia? Do you have, specific capabilities you want to achieve, as well as to have a clear strategy when entering the market. And as a second step, then looking at, who would be the target consumers. You would have to conduct, some kind of stakeholder mapping exercise to identify if it's, more suitable to target the private sector or the public sector, as well as, moving to the third step, then identifying the barriers to entry, whether it's startup cost, regulatory hurdles, customs duties, or, looking at what are the existing competitors doing in the market. Are your competitors largely operating via distributors, or have they established some kind of sales unit or even manufacturing unit here in Malaysia? And as a fourth step, then we have, either appointing a local distributor or, setting up some kind of own presence via, a sales unit or manufacturing unit or so on. These are basically the two options then companies can use when choosing to enter the Malaysian healthcare market. And as a fifth step then, of course, is to meet the regulatory compliance. We have a quite clear guidelines here in Malaysia, I would say, when it comes to submitting device registration, but it is a process that can take, everything from a few months up to a year, depending on what is the risk level of that medical device. And as a last step here, we have the commercialized phase, which is, referring to just monitoring the business opportunities, as well as using Malaysia as a hub to tap into other markets in Southeast Asia. Is of course a very relevant strategy in these days, as we see, these upcoming free trade agreements coming into effect. There is some chances there for Malaysia to position itself as a medical device manufacturing hub for Southeast Asia, and grow even stronger in this sector than it already is today. And just to finalize on this slide, and we have identified some of the key problem statements when it comes to healthcare in Malaysia. And this is based on our interviews with both our public and private healthcare partners here in Malaysia. But one of the the first things I would like to mention here, of course, is to how can we ensure that healthcare is delivered, and we see an increasing economic burden and limited financial resources across the board, especially when it comes to the public sector. Until we get that budget increase, it is still a high strain on the public healthcare sector, but there is also a need to improve the healthcare facilities and equipment. And we see one of the larger impacts of COVID-19 is how the adoption rate of telemedicine has really accelerated due to this. We see that patients are choosing more convenient remote screening, using your cell phone to connect with doctors and so on, has definitely increased due to the pandemic. But we also see in terms of medical equipment that they're also going to be a high demand. But here I think the focus is more on efficiency as well as cost to a certain extent when dealing with the public sector. But the private sector, I would say that cost is still a consideration, but not as much as the public sector then. And we have some more points here related to the changing disease landscape and how it's affecting healthcare systems here in Malaysia, as well as the increasing number of NCD patients, as well as infectious diseases, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, and the need for disaster management tools. And here we see that this changing disease landscape is going to accelerate the need for interoperable medical devices and population data, solutions backed by AI to help earlier identify and capture those at-risk, high-risk patients then. As of course, treating those patients at an earlier stage and identifying them at an earlier stage will result in cost savings in the long run than treating them at a late stage. And just to very briefly touch upon these last 2 points here, I think they're kind of overlapping, but we see that digitalization will be key to improve the hospital experience, as well as treatment adherence and disease awareness, which is still quite slow here in Malaysia. So there is very large opportunities when it comes to digitalization, both in terms of software and management solutions for hospitals, as well as digital solutions targeting the patients then to enable them easier access to healthcare. And I think I will pause here and hand over my colleagues. I know we're eager to go through the Indonesia section as well. But if there are any questions, feel free to post them in the chat or reach out to me via email at, email is listed here on henrik.sigmet@businesssweden.se. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrik and Emma, for that comprehensive overview. My name is Erik Odar. I am Business Sweden's Trade Commissioner to Indonesia, Jakarta, where we have had our office for a little more than 10 years then monitoring the Indonesian market. And it's I'm very glad to also be able to join this webinar together with you at SweCare and look at Indonesia in combination with Malaysia, because as you will soon hear here, there are many similarities. These are the two markets in this region where we see the largest business potential for Swedish companies in this sector. And in the Indonesian context, actually the healthcare sector is the one industry where we currently see the biggest opportunities. And we are currently now working to plan and set up a program that will enable Swedish companies to get quite significant government support in actually exploring these opportunities. So we're very much looking forward to share the details about this here today. So what we'll do is we will, just like Henrik did here for Malaysia, we will share our view on the Indonesian market for healthcare then with the various opportunities that we see. We will also touch upon some of the challenges that are connected to exploring these. And then we will look a little bit closer then at this program that we are now planning for, the Indonesian Healthcare Forum, which is a government-to-government supporting program for Swedish companies then that want to explore these opportunities. With me here today, I have my colleague Elsa Purba, who has been working for a long time monitoring and exploring the healthcare sector in Indonesia. And I'll hand over to you now, Elsa, to guide us through our findings about the market, and then I'll come back and tell you more about the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Erik. So hi, everyone. This is Elsa Purba speaking. So let me walk you through a bit about the healthcare overview in Indonesia. As my colleague previously, Henrik, mentioned, here we will also see some macroeconomic overview as well as the key statistics that are worth to explore. As you are aware, Indonesia is the world's fourth most populous country in the world. That alone has contributed so much to the healthcare expenditure in the nation. As we can see, the population has driven the health spending, and it is set to see a CAGR of 6% from 2017 to 2025. Another shifting signs that we see in the population is the fact that life expectancy is tends to be longer now, because people have better access to healthcare treatment, also nutritious food. But that also means that elderly people, there will be more of them in terms of proportion to the population, which means it will also require more healthcare services, also more medical device demand. We see that it is expected that by 2025, the medical device market in Indonesia will achieve the value of 1.9 billion USD. Obviously, that is something that is worth to explore for business companies like us. Another trend that we see that is yet to come, if you remember, Henrik mentioned about medical tourism as one of the important thing in Malaysia. That is also one thing that the government here see as an opportunity. We see that there is a plan to develop a special economic zone specifically for healthcare that is yet to build. Those are some of the important and interesting facts that I'll tell you about Indonesia. In the next slide, as I mentioned just now, the population, it has driven the healthcare expenditure, healthcare spending in Indonesia. And if we see from a macroeconomic perspective, there are two key players here. First is the private sector, and the second is the public sector. We know that public sector, or we can say it, the government here, interchangeably, has a crucial role in driving the healthcare landscape. The government, and as a matter of fact, the healthcare landscape in Indonesia, it adopts a mixed model. So both the public and private delivers the services to the citizens. We see that the government has driven so many projects, which I will tell you about in the hospital landscape section. But another thing that's worth mentioning is about the state budget. We remember about the COVID situation, about the pandemic in 2021 and 2020, where the state budget was increased to fulfill the demand of the healthcare requirement. And we see that the trend is keep on going. So for 2023, the state budget for healthcare, it is set to increase again from 8.7 billion to 11.4 billion US dollar. This is because of the harsh reminder from the COVID itself. So the government, specifically the Ministry of Healthcare, sees the need to transform the healthcare system. So from transforming the primary healthcare service, the hospital, by building more and more hospitals in the country, as well as even developing the resilience for pharmaceutical and medical device ecosystem. Another policy that is set to support this view is by pushing more collaboration between company, academia, also researcher. So for medical devices that will be used for research, it is now easier for the medical devices to be imported. So there will be no more heavy bureaucracy or heavy documents required for that. We also see that in terms of driving this healthcare expenditure, more and more digital transformation is set to increase. We've seen now that there are more than 90 digital healthcare companies in the region. Perhaps for those of you who are familiar with the Southeast Asia landscape, perhaps you have ever heard about Halodoc, also Allo Doctor, which is two of the largest key players for digital healthcare and telemedicine in the country. We also see that the government has recently issued a blueprint, because previously there has not been regulation set about this ecosystem, but now we see that there is a blueprint that shows what kind of roadmap that we see to be envisioned in the future. So speaking about the development of projects in Indonesia, I've mentioned that government here, because of the mixed model delivery, both central government and regional government are driving the development of hospitals in Indonesia. At the moment, we have 3,000 hospitals. However, it is not evenly distributed in the landscape. So if you can see the map here, we have 5 large islands, and Java is as the center of the country, where we also have our current capital city here. Most of the healthcare facilities are still concentrated here. So to cope with this rising healthcare demand that we expect in the future, we see that there is a need to develop more and more hospitals. We see that there is a plan to develop 25 hospitals in West Java, not only on the general hospitals, but we also see that there is a need to build special hospitals for like brain, heart, cancer hospitals being developed in other islands like in Kalimantan and Sulawesi. Of course, a lot of these hospitals, given the nature of the mixed model delivery, it will be spread it to the government. So there is a need to be proactive in approaching this government, depending on the target that you have in mind. At the moment, the ownership of hospitals, it's still mainly owned by the private sectors. We've seen a lot of key hospital chains like Siloam, also Harapan Kita. They are driving the development of this kind of hospitals. And obviously, with these hospitals being developed, it is expected that more and more medical devices will be in demand. And speaking of medical devices, similar to what Hendrik mentioned about Malaysia, Indonesia is also one of the hotspot for medical device market in the region. It is expected to be one of the fastest growing medical device market, because even though we have so many populations with us, we have resources with us. However, when it comes to the resources to build or the ecosystem to build medical devices, we are still limited on it. So in terms of the raw material or the strength that we have, we are still most dominantly by consumables, if we see it from the segment of each medical devices. So mostly like facial mask, PPE, we still produce it domestically, especially because of the COVID situation that we have last year. So more and more encouragement by the government for local producers to fulfill this needs or these demands in terms of COVID situation, also consumables. But for other or more advanced medical devices, such as the medical devices for diagnostic imaging, for patient aids, we are still importing a lot of it, mostly from our European counterparts, including Sweden, also the USA, as well as other Asian countries like Japan and China. So if we see each cluster of the medical device industry in Indonesia, similar to what we have with Malaysia, we also view it in terms of 5 clusters here: consumables, diagnostic, dental, orthopedics, and patients aid. A lot of them, given the limitations of our ecosystem here, to develop it by ourselves, we see that there will be more and more demand, both for the demand of the medical device itself, as well as to grow it in our country. There are some domestic productions that exist yet in the market, but if you can see as well, here even from a slide or a quick look, we can see that the Indonesian manufacturers, we are still strong in terms of consumables, whereas for other cluster here, we are still lack on the players of that. And for some areas that we do have local manufacturers, for example, like orthopedics and prosthetics here, while we do have some local manufacturers, the quality or maybe the level of advancement is not apple to apple yet. For example, the one that is developed by our local manufacturers tends to be simple orthopedics or prosthetics solutions, whereas in Smith and Nephew or other companies, they tends to be more advanced. As for the go-to-market roadmap, obviously similar to what Hendrik has mentioned, when you are aiming to go to a market as big as Indonesia, you need to identify all the problem statements. For example, we've seen the challenges faced by the country level is the uneven distribution of hospitals, meaning that there is a need for hospitals facilities as well as the demand. We then can identify target. Okay, so then which hospitals that we need to approach, for example. Also identifying the barriers to entry, such as the startup cost and timeline. When it comes to regulatory aspect, Indonesia has made quite a progress, where in 2021, we are simplifying the business licensing in Indonesia. So there is a one single solution developed by the investment coordinator agency. So that is a one-stop for businesses like you to start up your businesses in Indonesia. When it comes to going to Indonesia, you can either appoint your own local distributor here or setting up your own presence. And in doing so, meeting all the regulations required. And perhaps one thing that is unique to Indonesia and is very important for healthcare players like you is to ensure if you are approaching or if you are targeting hospitals, especially public hospitals or the ones that are owned by the government, it is very important for you to have your product being registered on the e-catalog, because more and more we see that the trend that more and more hospitals are being advised to procure their medical devices, etc., from the e-catalog system. You can register it yourself through your own local presence or through appointing the appointment of the local distributor. I will end my section here by identifying the key problem statements in Indonesia. As I mentioned now, we've seen that because of the COVID situation, also the limited or uneven distribution of hospitals, there was a risk of collapse in our public healthcare service. A lot of demand for healthcare service. However, the delivery was not being able to serve because hospitals are not spread evenly. On top of that, we also see that there is still a shortage of medical professionals, be it the general doctor or general practitioners, as well as the specialists. And we also see that there is still rather an immature, it's growing to be better. However, there is still an immature healthcare ecosystem, as well as an increasing non-communicable diseases given of changing lifestyles, as well as shifting lifestyles in the citizens. But speaking of problem statements, the good thing about it is that it means that there are opportunities to solve it. And the way we see that a lot of these problem statements, while we cannot fully answer it through medical devices alone, but it does help. For example, like medical technology or telehealth, it could help in terms of shortage of medical professionals, also the uneven distribution, as well as the increasing of non-communicable diseases. A lot of aspects or a lot of clusters in terms of medical technology solutions that can be used here in Indonesia that we are still needing here in the country. And we believe that by partnering between Swedish stakeholders and Indonesian stakeholders could be one way to solve it. And that is why in this occasion, we would like to also mention to you about CISP forum that will be introduced by my Trade Commissioner, Eric Oda.
So thank you very much, Elsa. I think this is something that we would like to take this opportunity to highlight. Right now, any Swedish company that is interested in exploring or entering Indonesia has quite a significant support through what is called the CISP program. So basically the background here is that over the past few years, the governments of Indonesia and Sweden have come gradually closer and closer in terms of collaboration. And what has been formed then is under the name of CISP, the Sweden-Indonesia Sustainability Partnership. This is really a vehicle to kind of drive the collaboration between our two countries. The narrative behind this is connected to sustainability. I saw there was a question here earlier on sustainability and healthcare. As we all know, Sweden is one of the world leading countries in the area of sustainability, sustainable development. And Indonesia on its side is one of the countries in the world that has the most important and longest journey to go in terms of sustainability development and the SDGs. So here, Sweden and the Swedish government has committed to support Indonesia in this development through various capacity building efforts, as well as through providing know-how and technologies of various kind through our different companies that have them available. And this goes across all industries. So this is the narrative. What this provides then is a platform for Swedish companies to get the help that is so often needed when working in Indonesia. Help to get connected, help to get promoted and get visible and compete, and help to get the government support that many times is needed, especially in the healthcare. So the way this works is that every year there is a very large conference called the CISP Week, where our two governments meet together with the technology and solution providers from Sweden. We look back at the year that has passed and the various programs that are active under the CISP partnership to drive collaboration, and then we discuss the next steps going forward. As you see in the middle column here, healthcare is one of the prioritized sectors and programs under this partnership. So there is, during the CISP week, something that goes under the name of Sweden-Indonesia Annual Healthcare Forum, where the Ministry of Health, together with Swedish solution providers, Indonesian hospital owners and other stakeholders get together to discuss this thing. And this is then the possibility and option for any of you who would be interested to explore this is to join for next year. So next slide, please. So the CISP week will be on December 5 to 8 this year. And what I should note here then is that over the past couple of years, this whole conference, this whole week has, due to the pandemic, been digital through various webinar formats. You see some pictures of what it has looked like in the past. This year, however, this is going live, so it will be a week-long, very large-scale conference between Indonesia and Sweden. And December 8th is the day that is dedicated then to healthcare. So Swedish companies will be joining. There will be people joining online as well. The event will be broadcast, but there will also be plenty of visitors from Swedish companies who are looking at getting connected and opening up in Indonesia or expanding into Indonesia, who will join live for the conference. And in this conference, we will have Ministry of Health, selected stakeholders. We will have various hospital management executives and other industry-related stakeholders as per request by the company. This is very much done in collaboration with the partners in this. We kindly invite any of you to join and be a partner here. By partnering up, you also have the ability to shape the agenda and the contents of the conference day through healthcare. As you can see here, a partnership includes also quite a lot of research, especially on the hospital development. There will be an ability to steer who gets invited and the agenda points. There will be an opportunity to arrange signings officially, take speaker partnerships, any things like this. And the main event is on December 8th. After that, we will support to set up follow-up meetings as needed. And there will also be a specific hospital visit arranged. So it's quite a significant package of promotion activities around this. And I really think that any company who is seriously looking at exploring this market would have a lot of value from joining this program and collaborate. So we can't go into more details on it here, but should this be of interest for any of you who are listening to this or watching the recording, please reach out to either myself or my colleague Elsa here, and we will be happy to discuss it further and see what it can do for you. With that, then, we have concluded the Indonesian part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, and of course, Emma, Henrik, and Elsa. Really interesting, and interesting to see that there are similarities between these markets, though they are quite different as well. So now I will hand over to Navina Tambiraya of MIDA, the Malaysian Investment Development Authority, and you will tell us a little bit more about policy insights. I think we're running a little bit after the program, but you have something like 10 minutes to do so, and then we'll have our final speaker. So please go on, Navina.
Thank you, Edna. I think Henrik has done a concise presentation on the landscape, and I will be going straight into policies when companies would want to start setting their footprint into Asia Pacific. So Malaysia, just as mentioned, it's in the heart of the Southeast Asia, and we have got the two main global ranking ports because we are situated at the access of Strait of Malacca, which is connecting the world supply chain. This I'll just skip because it was covered earlier, and yeah, so MIDA is the equivalent to Business Sweden in Malaysia, and our core agenda is to attract investment into Malaysia, to make it seamless to implement investors' projects in Malaysia, as well as to develop the local landscape in the country. We also advocate policies in that sense. So it's an end-to-end services that we provide as a government agency, from identifying potential investors to the point of ensuring talent collaboration, local sourcing, and post-investment matters are sufficed. Malaysia has got a very friendly policy in terms of the foreign policy stance, and foreign investment thankfully is seen as the driver of growth for the people and also for the country. And that has been the reason why we have come up with pragmatic and pro-business policies for investors intending to locate a presence in Malaysia to cover the whole of Asia Pac. For instance, if you do plan to have a manufacturing facility in Malaysia, you are allowed to hold 100% of your equity in the company incorporated in Malaysia, and also employ key as well as term expatriates from Sweden or all over the world. We are also have got IGAs signed with 60 countries, and Sweden is also part of it. And that is the reason why we have got over 5,000 companies from over 60 countries, a lot of Scandinavian countries as well, locating in Malaysia to cover the whole of Asia Pac. And that has been a stellar performance in 2021 in terms of investment. Manufacturing went up by 208% simply because it was the region for companies relocating from China, as well as company intending to shorten the supply chain, to desegmentize their supply chain, which has been centered in China. So Malaysia is very committed to improve the business climate, and this ranking is evident that it's easy to start up, to roll out, and also to scale up in Malaysia. Having the cost competitive edge and also with the good infrastructure, that has been the main pillar for us, for the investors to locate in Malaysia. And to have the assurance that the investment is protected. Most importantly, you will be able to enjoy the quality as well as the vibrancy of life from Malaysia as well. So we have recently entered into our 12th edition of a 5-year economic plan, and medical devices has continuously been a growth sector that Malaysia is emphasizing in. And Malaysia is the medical devices hub for Asia Pac, in fact. We have got 200 companies, of which 30 of them are MNCs. This is because of the legacy that we had from the 80s, where as a rubber-based commodity country, we have had the expertise in terms of making gloves as well as catheters. Today, 60% of the exports of the global exports come from Malaysia for gloves as well as catheters. Over time, when industrialization happened, Malaysia got the capabilities into machinings as well as the E&Es players came in. So the EMS sector as well as the machining and robotics sector is very strong in Malaysia, which somehow graduated the country into a high-tech producing medical devices hub. And as mentioned by Hendrik, the health tourism is picking up. We are the main health tourism for Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, simply because of the infrastructure. And over 90% of the medical devices produced in Malaysia is exported to US, Europe, and Asia. Investment wise, last year alone, FDI was close to 1 billion US dollars, and we see the trend picking up, especially in major products such as surgical gloves, catheters, instrument appliances, veterinary orthopedics, and also electronic diagnostic apparatus. So the value proposition that Malaysia has for a company intending to set its footprint into Asia Pac is the world-class infrastructure. We have got over 600 industrial estates, 18 free industrial zones, and 6 international airports, seaports, and the best part is it's all the internet connectivity is proper in the country. Besides that, we also have a very strong and reliable local suppliers, as I mentioned. The machinery, the local machinery industry in Malaysia has penetrated into the global supply chain. And that is why companies such as St. Jude, Symmetry, Dexcom has expanded and also has made Malaysia as their base for manufacturing. We have got world-class talent, 6th ranked for Asia Pac. We have got engineers and also around 19,000 engineers graduating every year, with 1,000 of them from Germany. And the country is also transitioning into Industry 4. Malaysia is a very small population country, and we cannot be reliant on foreign unskilled labor. Therefore, the country has transitioned into Industry 4 and robotics to ensure automation and also ESG is underpinning the whole investment climate in Malaysia. And all this with a robust tax, competitive tax, investment tax ranging from 60 to 100%, which can go up to 20 years in duration. So therefore, Malaysia will be a very good location for a medical devices hub, simply because of the strong E&E and also the machinery sector, which is well established in the country. At least 6 out of 12 largest semiconductor companies operate in Malaysia, in the northern part of the peninsula, which is known as Penang. Also, these are the potential areas: diagnostic, non-invasive solutions, convergent, imaging. Those are the sectors that we are currently emphasizing in. And as I mentioned, a robust tax place, 70% to full tax exemption on statutory income for a period of 5 to 10 years. If manufacturing is not the current focus, then we also can be a location for a regional hub. From Malaysia, you can locate yourself as a distribution hub or a center of excellence, because we have got 16 free trade agreements, ASEAN being the biggest of all, which opens up 600 million market. And recently we have signed the RCEP, which opens a third of the global population market access from Malaysia, which has a very good infrastructure in the whole of Asia Pac. And even for this, there are incentive schemes available for companies. And lastly, as a digital hub, we are seeing a lot of, we will be one of the first countries in Asia Pac to roll out the 5G implementation, and that itself will create a very good infrastructure for digital companies, medical digital companies, to locate into Malaysia, because we are currently known as the standout nation in terms of the digital realm. And for this, we have a digital investment office, which is a collaborative platform to answer, to facilitate, as well as to help you grow your digital presence in Malaysia and eventually throughout Asia Pac. So setting up your company in Malaysia is relatively easy. It takes 1 day to just register your company's name in Malaysia, 2 days to obtain a manufacturing license, and the whole process up to the point of certificate of fitness for a factory can take up to 2 months of duration.
So I think
And
maybe we
this-
need to, sorry, Navina, we need to
Yes.
round up a little bit to give some time to Johan as well.
Yep. And this is how the steps and options for investors. But, feel free to contact us. We are based in Stockholm for any further clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's good that you're here, available to everyone who's interested in learning more. And quite interesting to see how easy it is to open up business in Malaysia. So our next and last speaker is Johan Möller from Brighter with, well, you will share some tips and tricks and how it really is in these markets, not just the fancy words, So please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Anna, and it's great to see so many friends in this call. I hope you can hear me and see the screen. Just checking. Perfect. So seeing Navina, Erik, Elsa, Henrik, and Emma, and of course the friends we have from KEMLU, the Indonesian Foreign Department of Foreign Affairs. These are the people that you see in this call that will help you to figure out what works for you in both Malaysia and Indonesia. Very short about me. I lived in Indonesia for 5 years. 3 years of those I was with Business Sweden, colleagues of Erik and Elsa. And the last 2 years I've been with Brighter, a Swedish medtech company. And I'll very, very shortly just describe what Brighter is, so you can kind of see what we are facing in our market entry journey. And then I'll try to abstain from repeating too many stuff. So I'll do more talking and less slides, and that's the plan anyway. Brighter is working with diabetes management. That's what we try to support with. We have a collection device that collects blood glucose measurements as well as injected insulin dose. We have a mobile phone application, and we generate reports. The patients can generate reports that they then can share to healthcare providers as well as anyone else that they would like to get support for their disease from. Basically, what this means from a regulatory perspective and market entry perspective is that we have, of course, a simple medical device that you can see, you can touch it, you can understand that you need to do stuff with it. We have consumables that are manufactured by other manufacturers, which we're reselling. We also have a mobile phone application. So for you, those of you who are only in the digital realm, you'll see that MDR will classify you as maybe 2A, something like that, which means that you will be a medical device in Malaysia, but you won't necessarily be a medical device in Indonesia yet. So that's good to kind of figure out, but it takes a long time to see exactly how the local legislation applies to you, and it's kind of a fluid situation as well. With Brighter's offering, that means that we're working with healthcare providers, and the main value proposition that we offer is for patients to get a better control of how they're treating themselves, sharing that to their healthcare providers, improving the dialogue to the healthcare system. You kind of saw a little bit from Henrik and from Elsa that a big pain point is getting digitalization standardized. I would say it's a double-edged sword. At the same time, where we see standardization in some countries, we see a lot of opportunities for testing in Southeast Asia. The disparity in electronic medical records, for example, means that there's room to try out things. It's not an easy journey, though. Brighter is, I'm not going to go too much into detail of this, but we're present in a lot of different markets. Regulatory-wise, that creates complications. We are IVDD and MDD in Europe. And looking into Southeast Asia, where Brighter kind of started to look into during 2017, this is kind of the reason why we are interested, and that's high population, a lot of people that has this condition, diabetes, that we're focusing on, and it's a big problem, it's a big burden for the healthcare system, it's extremely expensive. At the same time, countries in Southeast Asia typically have too few doctors and too many patients. We are present now with around 70 patients in Indonesia, and we see that doctors can meet hundreds of patients every day, which means that the communication is between doctor and patients is very stressed, and there's a pace to the follow-up, which you would see in your different areas as well. It's expected to increase cost-wise. It is the most expensive disease in the world. That's why we're also usually welcome to have discussions and dialogues with hospitals, as well as with regional and national governments to talk about the overall disease problem and the cost implications of it and what the pain points are. So that's coming a little bit back to what Henrik and Elsa was talking about on getting your value proposition right, understanding why is your product relevant in this country, in the setting, and how would it work? Who is it actually solving problems for? I'll skip a little bit. We did an exercise at Brighter trying to figure out who are our kind of customers, who do we need to approach? And we've been in, I think, both CISP, we've worked with MIDA, with Business Sweden quite a lot, and also joining some SweCare activities. We see that we need access to a lot of different stakeholders, both understanding from the patient perspective. We have 4 Indonesian doctors that are engaged with Brighter right now. The payers, that's both the public healthcare that you heard about from Elsa and I think also from Henrik, but it's also private. So it's both public and private insurance. I'm going to focus a little bit on the partners, and partners from my perspective is typically starting with a distributor, but then you can also include things like authorized representatives if you're not going for a classic distributor model, it might also be that you're partnering with hospitals. Politicians, you will need to interact with them depending on how your medical devices are regulated in Europe, because there's a lot of clarifications. Luckily, in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and the Southeast Asian countries that we've looked at, Malaysia and Indonesia, there is a common submission dossier for the regulation. So it's pretty homogeneous, but even if you've prepared everything for Indonesia, you will see that the implementation is different in Malaysia. And I saw one question from Glenn on data portability. Basically, what we see is that Singapore kind of led the way with the Personal Data Protection Act, PDPA. Malaysia has a very similar one, which is fairly advanced. Indonesia also kind of took influence from that one and made it possible to say that we're actually storing and processing data outside the country. Our data security is good enough according to your standards as well, and then they open up for it. But this is not always easy to find these regulations. So I think one lesson that I can share is we did a lot of analysis on our own. We used a lot of partners. In the end, I would find a good distributor partner or a market access partner in the country, because not only would they need to go through the regulatory process to get the approvals that you require to be present in the market, they also have the connections to key opinion leaders. If you want to set up advisory boards with doctors in the country, they would help you. They would also help you to set sales targets and kind of figure out together with you the go-to-market strategy that you would have. We also saw from Navena at the Malaysian MIDA organization that there's a lot of incentive and support if you want to localize and set up a local production, etc. Brighter, we see that as a long-term opportunity. In the short term, to get sales going, to start understanding how does our product track in the market, how is it being used, so what's the feeling for it. We tend to go for a distributor first. And we looked at the model to set up our own local subsidiary. In the end, we do employer of records setup where we can actually hire local staff to help us out, being dedicated to support us, but not setting up a legal entity just yet. So it's a lot of phases in the market entry journey, a little bit depending on your appetite to invest right off the bat. But I would say that there is a way to kind of pace it, to get a feel for the market, understanding what your business opportunities for your exact product is, and how you would go about to access that. Like Elsa said, is it the e-catalog, the public procurement system in Indonesia? Is that the big market enabler for you? Or is it the Mayo Clinic that's set to open up in Bali, with potentially having foreign doctors, a big change in Indonesian regulatory environment, and supporting maybe to have foreign doctors being active in Indonesia? Maybe that's your first entry point. For Brighter, our first entry point, the 70 patients or so that we have in Indonesia right now, comes from a collaboration with Business Sweden, where local government basically asked for support during COVID. Then it took a lot of time to actually get all the approvals to be present. And I think this is something humbling as well for me. When I started to look into Indonesia, you start seeing these short timelines to get into the market. It's 3 months to do all the submissions and registration. And that's true if you have everything exactly right according to what the local authorities and regulations are requiring. That took Brighter about a year to set all that straight and to do a formal release for Indonesia. And it's easy to think that will be really quick and easy, but I think it's good to have respect that it takes some time to get everything in place to do a steady release for a new country. And a good thing to do that is, when you do that, is to have a local distributor that can help you through that process, someone that's done it, that has the connections, especially locally. Another thing, which I think is also interesting, because 3 years ago we were also talking about Halodoc and Grab and Doctor on Call and Allodoctor, etc. These telehealth players, they were growing like crazy. Then COVID happened and they formally exploded and became the norm. And it used to be illegal. If we go back 3 years ago, just in Indonesia, you're not legally allowed to do diagnosis over telemedicine. Halodoc did it anyway, kind of arguing that we're working according to some process that should be approved. And it kind of became a sandbox. So if I did the analysis outside of Indonesia saying, whoa, that's illegal, we can't do that. Had I been in Indonesia, which I was at the moment, I saw that, well, there are actually companies that do this with the favor of the government to try this out. So it's easy to sit in Sweden and analyze local regulations and draw conclusions, but you need some local partners, and that's where Business Sweden and MIDA and Kemlu or BKPM, the different organizations that are locally present, can help you out, and local distributors, of course, as well. In the end, it's going to be balanced. It's usually you try to find it white or black, which it can be according to regulations in Europe. In Southeast Asia, sometimes it's black and white, sometimes it's more of a gray area, and you need to figure out what applies to you and what are you going to do with that information, because the laws also change. Let's see if I had something more. I would look at the process that Henrik and Elsa showed on market entry. I definitely agree with that one. One thing that I would add that I would have done even earlier had I started the journey in Indonesia over for Brighter is to get the local distributor engaged very early on, and being a little bit more humble that even though we have a lot of local presence and a lot of local connections, in the end, it's good to have local partners that can help you out, and feet on the ground will do the business. The connections to the hospitals, it's difficult to manage from Sweden. So normally companies from Sweden working in these countries, they work via distributors. If you have a good distributor and you support your distributor well, you will have good success and a stable business. And then you can figure out when does it make sense to localize some of your production, maybe starting with packaging operations all the way to full local manufacturing. I've seen those success stories as well in both countries, and they work and they're great stories. It takes some time when you're a startup like Brighter to get to that point though. I think I'll stop there since we're running out of time. But I'm happy to share any experience, of course. There's been 5 years of market entry journey for Brighter in Southeast Asia, going out with an initial hypothesis to go to a lot of countries, then narrowing it down, trying out with local partners, trying to figure out how regulations apply as they are changing. And today we have patients in Indonesia, which is fantastic. And we're working towards other countries in Southeast Asia as well, getting help from MIDA to look into, and Business Sweden to look into Malaysia more specifically. But thanks a lot for the time, and thanks for the opportunity to present, Anna, and happy to share any experience that we have from our side at Brighter.
Thank you, and that was really great. It's always good to get the more hands-on picture from a company that has actually done the journey as well. So very valuable. And we have a couple of minutes perhaps for questions. There were some in the chat. I think you have received, let me see, you have received some answers. Okay, but Lars-Erik, would you like to ask your question orally, and maybe Henrik or someone else can answer? This is about waste management, hospital waste management.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. As I know, mentioned to Henrik here in my following question is that I simplify the landscape of healthcare due to the fact that there's so many disciplines within healthcare, and I define it as hospitals and medical healthcare produces two things, and it's healthcare and waste. That's the way of me simplifying the situation. And I followed the situation, particularly in Southeast Asia and especially Malaysia, for the past 5 years. And I've seen that the regulatory bodies have a very restrictive attitude towards how healthcare waste management would be performed. And that's one of the hurdles for us to pursue this market. And I don't know whether there's any changes in this, since Henrik mentioned that they have a more positive attitude to develop this. because I see that this is one of the major problems in the world when it comes to the effects of healthcare, and particularly about the pandemic, that they're increasing the amount of hazardous waste or medical waste that have to be handled with care. And
so the question is if what's going on to improve
exactly
waste management.
The regulatory bodies, what is the attitude there?
Is that a question that can be answered just like that, or
I don't think so.
Should it be followed up?
Yes, Lars, thank you for your question. I think, in terms of the specific regulatory bodies and how they are perceiving this as an issue, we have seen this, reaching the media as it is a pressing issue, this increase of clinical waste, especially following COVID-19. But to see, in terms of how the regulatory bodies see this going forward, and we see, sustainability is a growing focus area, but I haven't, as to say now specifically, I haven't seen any specific movements in this in terms of regulatory action, but this is definitely something we could follow up with. Let us, I think, over email, and we can perhaps take a deeper look into this, what specific area it is.
Yes, and perhaps also something for the CISP conference, or the healthcare forum during the CISP week in Indonesia, then to consider. So maybe, I don't know, would you have a time for one more question? That was this from Glenn about data storage. I don't know if that one was answered enough, but I guess it's about patient data, and can it be, can it be in the cloud somewhere else, or does it have to be within the country? Is that, someone knows anything about that? Perhaps you, Johan, how do you work with you mentioned it, but
we looked into this quite a lot. It's part of our preliminary investigations when looking at a country, because we need to have data portability. Brighter uses Amazon Web Services out of Ireland for data processing, and we use a 3G or 2G connectivity inside the device to send the data over the mobile network to Ireland, and then back to the user's telephone to consume and to share. So we are definitely affected by all kinds of data portability laws and data privacy and security regulations. In Malaysia and Singapore, it's easy. PDPA is where you go. In Singapore, that means you need to get pre-approved by the PDPA board. And you can get into those programs from the Center of Healthcare Innovation to get contacts, to get that reviewed. In Malaysia, it's fairly similar. It's fairly transparent. In Indonesia, it's a little bit more tricky, and the law changed last year as well to look into the data portability. So we basically, from Brighter's perspective, had a gray area. Is it allowed or is it not allowed? And it's been a lot of companies that had the same. Last year, we did a fairly proper analysis on data portability, and seeing that if we store according to GDPR principles in Europe, and we can ensure data privacy and security, then that would be sufficient for Indonesia as well, is our analysis.
Okay, so it sounds like it's not that complicated anyway. That's great. So I think these were the, did I miss some question? No. Okay, time is out anyway, so I think we will just have to say thank you very much to our speakers and experts. Really great to have you here. I was also happy to see so many in the audience joining us today, and let's keep the dialogue going. There are exciting things going on with the CISP and also other possibilities in Malaysia. So keep in touch with Business Sweden, with Navina, and with WeCare, of course, if we can support you in this. And thank you very much. Have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.